Consumers in South Africa say they are less confident about their household finances than they were at the beginning of the year. This is according to the FNB and the Bureau for Economic Research Consumer Confidence Index, which dropped in the second quarter of 2023 to the lowest level in a year. According to the survey, the majority of consumers think now is a terrible time to buy durable items since they anticipate a decline in economic growth over the following 12 months. For more on the findings, we are joined by FNB Chief Economist Mamello Matikinca-Ngwenya. Mamello, thank you very much for your time as always. No surprises here, really looking at the current period we are in when it comes to the high cost of living, but the fact that this reading is the second lowest on record since 1994 also suggests that consumers are worried about South Africa's economic future and household budgets. That is a serious worry that this is the second lowest time we've reached this level since 1994.
Absolutely, Xolani. I think if we look at where the economy finds itself today, the central bank has hiked interest rates quite considerably in this cycle by about 475 bips. Inflation still remains relatively high, although it's declining. The currency has also remained quite volatile, essentially making any travel quite expensive. The labour market, as indicated by the latest data from Statistics, continues to point to weakness in that segment of the economy. So it is not surprising that sentiment in SA remains quite weak, and we are starting to see it. The pessimism, specifically in the affluent segment of the market, really intensifying. And if we think about purchasing power, we know that it's that segment of the market that holds the largest purchasing power.
Mamello, let's talk about the high-income households. Their sentiment levels have declined as well. They've declined the most, which signals bad news for the retail industry, as wealthy consumers have the highest purchasing power of all the income groups. How are the high-income earners, and we're talking here about those who have a household income of around 20,000 rands per month, how are they doing at this time? Because it seems like they are the most impacted.
Absolutely. So I think if we just look at the company results that have come out over the past couple of weeks and months, it's quite clear that consumers that are exposed to credit are feeling the impact of increasing interest rates. Added to that, I think if you look at the performance of the JSE from a non-labor income earnings point of view, we've seen that the JSE has taken quite a big hit. So essentially, the levers that segment of the consumer had have fallen away. So we do expect that these consumers will likely be discerning just in terms of their participation in the economy. And I think another consideration, of course, is load shedding. That segment of the market is probably very largely invested in alternative energy. So just in terms of the ability to participate from a purchasing point of view, there is, I think, a significant amount of strain that they're feeling. And again, I think it comes through quite strongly in the survey when we look at expectations of finances over the next 12 months. We see that this has deteriorated quite a bit. So in essence, our reading of this is that, consumers are likely not to be as active in terms of purchasing or spending, and household consumption expenditure will likely also reflect this weak sentiment.
Mamello, something else that's interesting is that consumers are just not worried about their pockets, but they are also worried about South Africa's diplomatic relations with the rest of the world, particularly with what's happening around the geopolitics of Ukraine, Russia, and our relationship with the United States. But interest rates increases, rand depreciation have all contributed to the negative sentiment and impact amongst high earners?
Absolutely. So I think if we look at, the last monetary policy statement and the increase that came from that, the central bank stated that they're quite worried about the currency. We know that a weak currency is not very good for imported inflation and ultimately things like food inflation. And ultimately, I think this reflects in the interest rate. So, and also for consumers that are looking to travel outside of the country, a weaker currency makes it quite difficult for them to be able to do so. So, South Africa's diplomatic relations or foreign policy posture weighs quite significantly on sentiment. We see it come through in some of the business confidence surveys that have been conducted, and it's also coming through quite strongly in this consumer sentiment survey that we conduct with the Bureau of Economic Research. So all of these things consumers, I think, take into consideration and ultimately influence how they participate in the economy.
Not only in the main reading, but the sub-indices, Mamello, also showed a negative sentiment. Talk to us about those sub-indices and what they've displayed.
So ultimately, I mean, there's three things that we ask participants when we conduct this survey. We ask them if they would rate the current time as the right time to purchase big ticket items. We ask them their view of the economy over the next 12 months. And then the last question would be how they view their financial position. And you sort of can segment the data via different income bands to just get a sense of, how different participants in the economy view these variables. And what is coming quite strongly in the three is that consumers do not view the current time as the right time to purchase big ticket items across the different income bands. They're not optimistic about economic prospects over the next 12 months. And the last one, which is now coming through quite strongly in your more affluent segment of the economy, is around their finances. So we're seeing a little bit of resilience in the lower segment of the economy, but overall, I think, if one looks at the performance of the index, it really shows that, I think, on aggregate, that consumers are not feeling optimistic about the outlook of the country.
Certainly, alarm bells are ringing for the middle class and the high-income earners, at least in the first half of the year. Mamello Matikinca-Ngwenya, thank you very much for your time. She is the chief economist at FNB.